Welcome to Finding Certainty with your host and U.S. Army veteran, Patrick Lang. Over the next hour, you'll learn from Patrick and his expert guests how to attract more certainty into your business and your life. Now, here is your host, Patrick Lang.
Welcome to Finding Certainty. If you're a new guest, we appreciate you stopping by and spending your Friday morning with us. If you're a repeat listener, we're very grateful for our raving fans out there. We've heard a lot of feedback from our listeners. We're actually one of the fastest growing shows on VoiceAmerica. I think because there's a lot of uncertainty out there, and people are looking for solutions, are looking for ways to have more hope and more optimism in their life. And that's exactly what this show is about. If you're getting to know Finding Certainty, we have a number of different types of guests, many of them business related, but also artists and entertainers and athletes and so forth, because certainty touches our lives in a number of different ways. That desire for certainty, for peace of mind, for assurance of where we are and where we're going. Today, we have a very special guest, Mr. Paul Yoachum, and his whole business, everything he does on a daily basis, falls right in line with this objective of knowing where we're at and knowing where we're going. So, Paul, thanks for being with us this morning. Really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, excited to be with you. Thanks, Patrick.
Well, we actually got to get together in person just last week, didn't we? I was up in Utah with my business partner, Frank Hellring, and we went to Bam Bam's barbecue for some of the best barbecue I've ever had with you and your partner, Lance. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah, I think you had the barbecue nachos, which is kind of a staple for that location. So
I know I'd never even heard of such a thing, and it was probably the best barbecue I've ever had. But I loved the combination of the barbecue with the nacho cheese and I'll be back next time I go to Utah Valley. I will for sure stop back at Bam Bam's.
Yeah. Plug for Bam Bam's. Maybe they can be a show sponsor in the future.
Absolutely. Free barbecue for life, right?
Right.
Fingers crossed.
Exactly.
So anyway, we always start out our show by sharing a couple of reasons why I've invited this specific guest on Finding Certainty. And as I was saying earlier in my intro, there is a great deal of uncertainty out there. And in fact, had a guest on a few weeks back named Angel Tessie. She's a media expert. And right in the middle of her show, she Googled the word certainty, and there were thousands and thousands of hits just in the media, right, in the last 48 hours or so. But then she, on a whim, looked up the word uncertainty, and there were tens of thousands of hits. I mean, even hundreds of thousands just in the last day or two. And it says a lot about how people are feeling out there in America. They're feeling nervous and worried and unsure of what's happening. Rising costs, political division, and the list goes on. So one of the first reasons I wanted to invite Paul on our show is his company, FindMojo, which I love the name, by the way. They are combating this. They've created an assessment that can help organizations of any size, from large to small. They can offset the uncertainty that so many of them operate under. Secondly, Paul has a wealth of experience in training, in development, as a speaker, as a program developer. I've met a lot of people in my life, but very few have your resume, if you will, your curriculum vitae, your CV of experience in this space, right? Of developing organizations and their people. And that's what every one of us want. We all want to get better, right? And if we don't, we're probably not going to be around for much longer. So anyway, again, thanks for being here. Looking forward to the conversation today. We've taken your assessment. We've gotten to know you, and now we're introducing you to others just because we believe so much in what you're doing. And why don't we start out by getting to know you a little bit, though? Tell us a little bit about where you grew up and about your family, maybe, and what brought you to where you are today.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks, Patrick. So I am born and raised in the great state of Utah. So I was raised my formative years in a little town called Ogden, Utah, which is about 35 miles north of Salt Lake City. So if you've ever been out here, we've got some great skiing. We've got 3 world-class ski resorts that weren't too far from my home, a couple of which were featured in the 2002 Salt Lake Olympics. The Super G downhill was carried out at Snow Basin. So for any skiers out there, I currently reside about 45 minutes now, almost an hour south of Salt Lake City. So I've kind of gone to the other end of the valley. If anybody knows Utah, 3/4 of the population lives along what's called the Wasatch Front, which is a mountain range. And I've lived here for about 20 years. So married, got 3 kids ranging from 25 to 15. We spaced our kids not on purpose, but 5 years apart, just kind of happened that way. And so I've got a 25-year-old son, I guess she'll be a 20-year-old daughter, and a 15-year-old son who will be starting high school this year. So that's going to be an adventure as he gets his driver's license here in the next 10 months or so.
That's great. I have 5 children myself, 25 to 17. So I married a widow with 3 kids and went from 0 to 4 in a year.
There you go.
They were
Dad.
4, 3, and 1. We have 2 boys together. So
yeah, so my journey to where I'm at today, it wasn't a traditional path to becoming a management consultant or a trainer, if you will. I actually have a background in marketing, and for 15 plus years, I worked in different marketing capacities and different marketing executive roles. And along my journey, I started teaching marketing classes at some of the local universities here in Utah. And I fell in love with teaching. I fell in love with leading people in a classroom and helping people, learn and things like that. And it probably has to do with the fact that both my parents were school teachers, even though they tried to tell me, Paul, whatever you do, do not be a school teacher. But I feel like I have it in my DNA. And so as my path progressed in the corporate world, I ended up pivoting from marketing. I still dabble in it, if you will. I on my LinkedIn bio, it says I'm a recovering marketing executive. But I fell in love with training, consulting. I have no trouble being in front of an audience. I love entertaining. I love instructing and facilitating. And so as my marketing career took me into the corporate training world, in a previous company for 8 years, and now with my own firm, I've just kind of carved that out. And so I love the elements of instructional design. I love just seeing people feel like they're, I know it sounds kind of cheesy and cliche, but just if people can, change their way of thinking or get a little bit more out of life or what they're doing. And so our work today focuses, as we'll talk about, I'm sure, primarily on helping people find more certainty and enjoyment and fulfillment in the work that they do every day.
Right. Well, you've created and developed quite the name for yourself as a master trainer, as a lead instructional designer. Your programs seem to follow a theme. I mean, just some of the titles: Find Your Mojo, What Motivates Me, All In, Leading with Gratitude, Core Motivators for Sales Performance. There seems to be a theme here, Paul, if I may say so. They all seem to be revolving around inspiring your people, motivating your people, and leading in a way that draws the best out of them. Am I safe in saying that?
Yeah, our firm's work, we spend about 90,000 to 100,000 hours of our lives working, which is, about 3/4 of our life.
Right.
And that's a lot of time to be spent doing something that you're miserable in, something that, and we're not saying that every day is going to be perfect, but that's a lot of time to be spent doing things where you're not fulfilled. And we've seen every data point conceived on this topic, but the one that really always jumps out to us is that people who are happier and fulfilled at work tend to be 150% happier in life overall. You rarely probably ever met somebody who is super miserable in their work, but really happy in life. I want whatever they're taking, I want.
Right.
And so, and I can't take full credit for all of this work. I've got some great business partners who are New York Times bestselling authors and researchers who have really studied culture for decades, and and the reasons why people want to quit a job, the reasons why people, what keeps people, what helps them move their motivation up or down. I mean, most people don't go into a new job and think to themselves, I'm going to phone it in and mail it in. Most people are pretty excited when they start a new position or a new role or a new assignment, but 12 months later, you check in with them and they're completely miserable. And it's almost like, your teenager driving your car and hitting the curb. It's like the alignment's completely off. Where did things get out of alignment? Right. So
Yeah.
we, there's been a lot of books written on the topic. There's been a lot of speeches given on the topic, but we try to take things, approach things from a scientific manner. And that's why we created this Motivators assessment, which we'll talk about, because it's grounded in behavioral science.
Well, it's incredible. It's not hyperbole when I say you've developed a name for yourself. These programs that you've been instrumental in developing or helping develop, I mean, they've been used by, 75% of the Fortune 500. Now you're invited to come and speak on organizational management, on leadership topics all over the country. And isn't it interesting how in our careers, we don't usually set out with a goal in mind? I mean, some do, but I think I would say it's an adventure to say it's the majority of us figure it out as we go along. And we don't always end up where we intended to end up. But your career has taken this path of you just finding out one, you enjoy teaching and you enjoy training. I'm the same way. I love getting up in front of a group, and I think we're the odd duck out that actually enjoy public speaking, right?
Right.
People is their number one fear. But isn't it funny how you just kind of peel back the layers and figure out something, one, that you're good at, and two, that you enjoy, and hopefully in the process you end up in a role where you get to do those things. And you've certainly done that. But it's hard figuring it out. We don't always know ourselves as well as we wish we did, right? We think we do, but
yeah,
subconsciously there's things going on and interests. And as we get into after our first break here, I want to get into how the Motivators assessment works, because it's such a powerful tool based in science, as you've said, that helps us peel back those layers and helps us get to the heart of that artichoke, right?
Right. Exactly,
and what we can do with that as employers or employees is extraordinary. So as you look at your career, let's talk about maybe the past a little bit. What was an experience you've had during your journey getting you to where you are that stands out in your mind? You've worked with some extraordinary companies, some really great programs, learning and growing and developing into the Paul Yoachum of today. Is there an experience or a story that stands out for you?
Yeah, there's numerous ones. If I had to pick one, I just kind of maybe encapsulate it. We, like you mentioned, we work with clients large and small, from the biggest of the Fortune 500. I've had the privilege of, working with some of their leadership teams, all the way down to the small business owner who's, got 15 employees and is worried about payroll and, tax benefits and things like that. And
right.
And I just love hearing that more than anything, that, this really made a difference to us. We were able to, keep an employee's in their position longer than they thought. Or, what, I really discovered this about myself. This tool that you have really nailed us. So I'll just give you a quick example. We were working with a vice president at Wendy's. Everybody knows Wendy's.
Sure.
And she and her team took this Motivators assessment, which we'll explain more about. But at a high level, one of her top motivators was pressure, the manager, the division vice president. And she loved tight deadlines. She loves, when she's under the gun or the lights are the brightest, she's at her best. She's like, I love it when my schedule's full. She needs that in order to get things done. Mm-hmm. Well, she had an employee who was one of her top employees who happened to have this same pressure motivator dead last. So there's these 23 motivators that we all have. We'll explain more here in a minute, but she had it dead last. And she was constantly stressed out at work to the point where she found out that or, she told us, I love my job, but I can't work for Diane. And Diane was flabbergasted. She thought, I've got my best employee here who's not fulfilled. She had no idea she was stressing her out. She had this major blind spot. So this completely changed their relationship and the way they worked together. She would give her assignments that had longer lead times, and she would check in on her stress levels. Anyway, we heard from the employee, and the employee said, you know what, this saved my job. And so stories like that obviously are certainly what we love to hear, and a lot of the reason why we are trying to do what we're doing. And we're not going to solve everybody's job problems and turn every terrible boss into a great boss, but that was an opportunity where we found people an opportunity, to the point of the name of this show, some more certainty in their job. And so
Exactly. It's interesting because I talk about how we don't always know ourselves, but certainly us as employers, as leaders, we don't always know our people. We think we do. I mean, this is a great example of that. I think an executive or a manager, an owner, a leader with integrity, they care about their people. They're trying to do the best they can of leading and inspiring them. But so much of it is unknown. And even when we think we know somebody, so often it's unknown. And you talk about the great resignation, right? The quiet quitting.
Yeah.
Where talent retention is so important and development is so critical. And yet people who are unsatisfied, they're leaving, or they're just, there's those who stay, but they don't produce anything, right? They're just phoning it in, as you say.
Yeah.
That's a real problem in the workforce. And to your credit, which we're going to talk about in the next segment here, you've come up with a solution that is truly making a difference. It's not just a hope. You're seeing the results in companies all over America. So
yeah, we've done a lot of the research on why people quit jobs. And to your point, especially as you look at younger generations, and 75% of millennials, or excuse me, Gen Z, say that they've quit a job for mental health reasons. 50% of millennials say they've quit a job for mental health reasons, and only 10% say they feel comfortable talking to a boss about it. And so, we can dive into that a little bit more as well. But the reality is we live in a time of the most convenience we've ever had in the history of the world. All the world's information is in our pocket. We live longer with modern medicine than we ever have before, and yet our younger generations are more stressed out. And what's driving that at work anyway is the fear of the unknown, not knowing if they're going to have a place, and so or where the company's going, or where their career is headed. And so we're trying to combat that by shining a spotlight on the unknown.
Well, just like the title of our episode today says, it says that how the FindMojo motivators can change everything. And this assessment, I'm excited to get into it in this next segment. We're up against our first break here, but I think it's transformational. It's something that can dramatically change and improve the workplace environment. You're seeing it happen. So we're not just hoping, right? This is
right.
We have the data.
That's right.
But let's go to a quick break here and let our advertisers talk with you. They want to look at you and let you look at them. And we're visiting with Paul Yoachum of FindMojo. We'll be right back.
All right, perfect, guys. All clear. Back in about 2.
Thanks, boss.
How often do they do a commercial break? Every 15 minutes or so? 10, 15 minutes?
We have 2 of them. Well,
Okay.
Every 15 minutes. So we'll have one more a little bit later. So usually we talk about you, kind of get to know you a little bit in the first segment. And then the second one, we get into what you do.
Awesome.
In the last section, we'll see where we take it, kind of where it leads us. It's funny, when I first started doing the show, I was not stressed about it, but I wanted to do a good job. And I wrote out all these questions, and, it was very scripted the first 3 or 4 episodes. And then one day I didn't have time to do that. So I just winged it. It was the best one I'd done yet. So I don't do any prep anymore.
Yeah.
I know hosts who actually do a pre-interview with their guest and talk about their show and plan out their questions and their dialogue. And I don't do that. And I have a good friend, Ninan De Rosa. She's a TV personality here in Vegas. We're actually starting a TV show together.
Oh, wow.
It's going to be called Patrick and Ninan Live, or excuse me, Ninan and Patrick Live. That was very important.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but she says she doesn't even want to talk to him before. She says if they start telling her what they do, she says don't tell me. Wait till we get to the show. Yeah,
Yeah.
she wants it off the cuff. She wants it natural, and I've taken that same tack. If you get on Frank's show, he'll probably meet with you before because he likes doing a pre-show. It's to each their own, but
I'll follow whatever works for the host. I'll follow their lead. So
6.5 one does another. Probably it's
right.
Individual preference, but I've found that I like just seeing where it takes us. I'll come in with a general understanding, a little bit of research, but.
All right, sorry to jump in here, guys. Coming back in just a few seconds.
All right, thanks, Matt.
Voice America Business Network. You are listening to Finding Certainty with Patrick Lang. Have a question for Patrick or his guests? Join us on the show at 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Now, back to the show with Patrick.
Welcome back to Finding Certainty. We're visiting with Paul Yoachum. He's the co-founder, managing director, or managing partner, is that correct? And senior consultant with FindMojo. And when I first heard your name, I thought that's probably one of the coolest names I've ever heard for a company. We met with a mutual colleague of ours on Monday, where I introduced you and your partner to Transact Card. It's the company we've been talking a lot about lately. Peter Rancy, the co-founder there, and the first thing out of his mouth was, "I love your name." Right, just very first introduction. So prior to the break, we were talking a little bit about why employees leave, and oftentimes employers are surprised that their employee left. They thought they were doing well, they were performing, and yet the employee wasn't happy. We talked a little bit about how we kind of fall into our careers oftentimes. We don't even know ourselves where we want to go and what we want to do. I mean, I remember being in college, and it took me forever just to pick a major, because I thought about maybe going to law school, but in the summers I was doing sales and I was really good at it. And I thought, I'm pretty good at this. Do I really want to go to school for 2 more years? So I actually majored in English, technical writing, because I figured, well, whatever I do, I'm going to need writing skills and communication skills, but I still didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life. And I think there's a lot of us out there that feel the same way. We don't know until we've done it, right? We don't know until we've been through it, and we start to formulate those understandings and those interests and passions and so forth. So let's continue the conversation about why people leave, because I think it's an important topic. We have a lot of businesses and employers who listen to this show, and they ask the same questions. How do I recruit people, and how do I retain my people? What are your thoughts on that topic, Paul?
Yeah, great question. We look at this, yearly, and everybody will assume that people leave because of money, and money is usually in the top 5, but it has been replaced by a number of other reasons as the top reason, and it's different for everybody, obviously. But usually, you can boil it down to one of 3 things. It's people feel stuck. They just don't feel like they're progressing, not necessarily even in their careers, but just as human beings. They just are in a rut, right? And that could be driven by a myriad of things. I don't like my boss. The company I work for has got a toxic culture. There's certain parts of my job I just don't like doing. So that's a common one, right? They just don't feel like they're progressing. And certainly in our younger generations, where motivators like impact and learning are important to them, if they don't feel like they're progressing and growing as people and seeing the results of the work that they're doing, they get bored and they get frustrated. Another big one, and you mentioned some of the titles of some of the courses we've developed, is a lack of recognition and appreciation. I mean, think about it, Patrick. When's the last time you've heard anybody come home from work and say, I didn't get anything done today because they were so busy appreciating all the hard work I do, or they were too busy showing me recognition, right? It's never been said in the history of, and so it's interesting when people leave a company and they have a formal exit interview with the HR department or whatever, and they ask the question, why are you leaving? That most people want to leave on good terms and they don't want to, burn a bridge. And so what do they say? They say, well, I'm leaving for a better opportunity. So we worked with a company. I'll just share a quick example here in Utah. They shall remain nameless, but they lost 100%. They had 100% turnover in their sales and customer service departments in the course of a year.
Wow.
And we looked at why people were leaving the company. And some of these were top performers who had gone to like Performance Club and President's Club and things like that. And when they said, when they asked the question, why are you leaving? They said, well, I'm leaving to pursue a better opportunity. When we dug into the data, we found that some of these people were leaving for $500 or $1,000 more a year. So I don't know how they define better opportunity, but they're not leaving for a better opportunity from a monetary perspective. They're leaving because it's terrible to work there, is what they're really saying, right? And
Right.
so
another place is going to be more fun. It has a better culture. They're recognizing their people better.
Yeah,
Something along those lines, usually.
exactly. And all these places that, here, at least in Utah, among the tech sector, they've all got the same perks. They've got the free food, the ping pong tables, but that's not culture. Those are perks, right? And so, but a lot of these people just felt like they were stuck. They weren't going anywhere, or the company wasn't going anywhere. And again, back to my earlier point about uncertainty, the fear of the unknown. I had a boss once where I didn't know where I stood. One day, it's like I could get fired the next day, or I could get promoted the next day. And it drove me absolutely crazy. And so when leaders can remove that uncertainty or that fear of the unknown and answer a few questions for their employees, regardless of their age, like, where are we going? And do you have a future here? And what is the outlook? Where are we heading? Right. And start to be more transparent. And obviously a way to shine a spotlight on that is helping them understand what drives them and gets them out of bed. But that can reduce a lot of stress and anxiety for some of these workers that are, they don't know what. And of course, COVID exacerbated that. You look at, was the workplace better before COVID, or is it better now? And certainly things have deteriorated in a lot of ways. It wasn't great before COVID, and now, turnover and productivity and motivation and all those key factors everybody talks about, in most cases they're worse, right?
Right. Well, I read somewhere in your bio that you said that your passion is building high performance teams. And you mentioned 3 words that I think are really important. You said where people are engaged, enabled, and energized. I think those are some empowering words, right? Those are powerful words. Engaged means you're really engaged in what you're doing. You're involved. You're focused. You're not just calling it in, as you said. You're enabled, which means you have the skills to do it and the motivation, and you're energized, which I think is an important piece to it, because you can be engaged and enabled, but are you energized? Are you jumping out of bed in the morning, excited to go to work and excited about being there, excited about where it's going to take you? Those are not easy things to accomplish in a workforce. So how do you do it? Let's get into this motivators assessment, because I think it's a critical piece. And I'll just preface it like this, guys. There's several different types of surveys or assessments that are out there. We've all heard of the DISC survey that analyzes our skill sets, and the Gallup survey and so forth. And some analyze skills, and some analyze personality, and so forth and so on. But those things are usually fixed. They're never going to change, right? And they're usually pretty apparent if I'm a red or a yellow or a D or an I or whatever. But motivators, I think, are much more under the surface. They're much less apparent, right? Less observable.
Yep.
And they also change depending on what cycle or what stage of life you are in. So let's talk about the assessment, because it's based in science. I know your company, you say motivation is our mission and passion is our purpose, but the science of motivation is what it comes down to. So do you mind just sharing the background on it, and let's get into how it works?
Yeah, you bet. And it all started with those 3 E's. And I wish I could take credit for them, but my two of my business partners, Chester Elton and Adrian Gostick, want to give a shout out to them. They did a big research study, and they looked at what are the components of a high performing team or a high performing culture. And they exhibited these 3 E's, right? We love it. Their people are enabled, or excuse me, they're engaged. So they come to work and they bring their best selves to work. They're willing to work harder without being asked, right? They're enabled. They have the tools, the training, the skill set, the environment to succeed. And they're energized. They're excited about it. We have a lot of people who work hard, but they just aren't really super excited about it. They're just going through the motions. And so we wanted to really kind of dig into that energized piece. And you're right, there's all sorts of assessments out there in the market, and they do serve different purposes. For example, the first dimension that most people look at to try to get to know themselves is, what is my personality? Well, our personalities are baked into us by the time we're 8 to 12 years old. Are we introverted? Are we extroverted? And great tools like DISC and Myers-Briggs and some of these other assessments measure that. And they'll ask a question or two here about motivation, but they don't really get into it. And then the second dimension that we look at is, what are my talents? What am I good at? So something like a Gallup Strengths Finder or some sort of strengths-based assessment is really good for measuring that. And they'll tell you that, you know what, if you're doing what you're good at, you're going to love it. Well, that's baloney. I mean, everybody on this broadcast today can think of something that they're good at that they don't enjoy doing. So, and there'll be people that tell you, well, following your passions is hogwash. And yeah, there's things that we're passionate about that we're not very good at. We call those hobbies, but we look at it from a scientific approach. So we found that just because people knew who they were and what they were good at, they were still disengaging in droves. They were still checking out. They were miserable. Turnover was still high, right? And so, and Gallup, even every year they produce their worldwide study on employee engagement, and 80-something% of the world's workers are disengaged or actively disengaged. And so we wanted to look at it a little bit differently. So we undertook a study that was conducted over a 10-year period and comprised of more than 1 million working adults all around the globe. And we took this data to our team of organizational psychologists and clinical psychologists, people much smarter than myself, and we had them mine the data. And we were really trying to answer 3 questions. One, what makes a person want to quit a job? What factors increase and decrease motivation? We're not always all in or all out, right? We're probably somewhere on this continuum. And lastly, is there a way that we can gauge what's most important to a person in their work right now, today? And to your point, unlike strengths and personalities, our motivators can change based on our situation, either at work or in life, and they can fluctuate quite a bit. And the result of all this research was, we found that we all have 23 common motivators that we share as working adults. The difference is we have them all in a different order. For me to have 2 people with the same top 23 motivators in the same order, I'd need more than 1 million people. But as managers and leaders, it's just so easy for us to treat everybody the same because it's easy or it's fair, when in reality, everybody's wired a little bit differently. So if we can, quote unquote, manage to the one and align people's work with what they're passionate about, I'm not saying we're going to fix every single problem, or that, you know, somebody's always got to take out the trash. There's certain tasks that just have to be done. But if we can add an aspirational element to a person's career, like where do you want to go, and develop people using this motivators data, it really can create loyalty and the 3 E's in an employee and a team. So it's pretty cool.
100%. You know, as I said, we've taken this. I took the report or the assessment myself and got my motivators report. It's interesting because a lot of it you read and you think, wow, that's me for sure. But there were surprises in there. You know, a lot of salespeople, they find that money was not their biggest motivator, that it's number 20, 21, or 22, you know, out of the 23. And I think that comes as a surprise, especially to a lot of people in sales, because it's so much about make that sale, make that money, right? And
it comes as a bigger surprise to the sales manager who's just been throwing money at people, trying to get them to be happier, more fulfilled. They're spending hundreds of thousands of dollars a year on sales training, and half their people are miserable, and all they're doing is training them to build skills and go work somewhere else eventually, right?
Isn't that true? Because that's the rub of it, or the irony is these organizations. That's why I think what you do is so valuable to an organization is they're putting dollars and time and effort and bandwidth in directions that are not producing the ROI they want. It's not keeping their people. It's not helping them want to stay longer. It's not making them more productive. If anything, it's just pouring it down the drain. A lot of the time, to your point, they're spending it on sales training, or they're throwing it at spiffs and things like that. And all that employee wants is more time off with their family, right?
Yeah. Yep.
So, I mean, give them another week of vacation. It'd cost you a lot less, and they'd be immeasurably happier, right? Or whatever the case might be.
Absolutely. I mean, money's an important factor. It's how we keep score. We all need money to pay bills and go on trips and buy things, right? We work for money, but for a lot of us, it gets to a certain point in our lives where the money we're making is at a minimum, at least meeting some of the needs that we have. And then other things become important. And so to your point, if I've got somebody who's working for me and family is a top motivator for them, I'm better off maybe looking at, hey, you know what, how can I give you more flexibility in your work schedule? How can I give you more time off, as you mentioned, versus just, hey, here's a bonus. They'll be grateful, but it's not a guarantee that they'll necessarily work any harder, right? There's countless people that are probably listening who have had a job where they felt they were well paid, but didn't mean that they were necessarily happy, right? So, but there are those out there that are driven by money, and that's fine. All these motivators are positive concepts, and so we're not going to knock somebody for, wanting to make more money. It's important for people to know that about them, and they can approach the way that they work differently.
I think it's interesting. It's a double-edged sword. It's a double benefit that when you do this assessment with employees, one, they understand themselves more, but the management team knows how to manage them. And they know how to assign roles and assign deadlines and create spiffs or rewards or recognition. And the thing is you can't have a cookie cutter approach, right? One size does not fit all.
Yeah.
So often as managers, executives, we're trying to use this, this Xerox copy approach to managing our team. And we're trying to, and we just don't understand why it's not working. We're coming up on our first break, or our next and last break, but I want to get into how you use this to manage in more detail. There's some interesting pieces to this that we're experiencing here at Certainty Management, my consulting firm, and I think there's things that you could share with us that are really invaluable. But before we do that, before we go to break, I wanted to share my motivators for the first 7. And as you've heard Paul say, there's 23 motivators. They put them in an entire list. They rank them from top to bottom, and they also group them they group those who take the assessment into one of 5 different groups: the achievers, the builders, the caregivers, the reward-driven, and the thinkers. And it's interesting. We can talk a little bit about these groups. But for me, and I'll tell you, when I decided to finally start my own company, I created the kind of company I always wanted to work for. And I've since surrounded myself with an extraordinary team. And I'm trying to learn how to delegate. I'm trying to learn how to use this understanding and these experiences to make it a great place to work. But my top 7, just so you know, are autonomy. That was number 1.
Mine too.
Problem solving, service, impact, ownership, challenge, and family are my top 7. And it's funny because my wife or anyone who knows me would listen to those and say, yep, you're doing exactly what you should be doing based on those top 7 motivators. And I feel the same way. I love what I do now. I love being able to create and build and make an impact and give service, and the different things we're doing as a company. It's really interesting because it took me 35 years to figure it out on my own. If I had taken this assessment 30 years ago, I probably would be in a whole different position, maybe doing the same thing, but with several more zeros after our paychecks or something. Who knows? But Anyway, any last thoughts in 30 seconds before we go to break?
Yeah, these 5 identities is what they're called, are archetypes, and they're really the way your motivators cluster together, at least your strongest ones. And I love how you listed yours. And the fact that you love your job is because these elements are present. These motivators aren't going to necessarily tell you which sort of a job you should take, regardless of whether you're a lawyer, a doctor, a pilot, whatever. But if these elements are present in your role, you're going to be more fulfilled regardless of which profession that you go into, right?
Exactly. All right, we're going to go to a quick break. We'll be right back. We're speaking with Paul Yoachum of FindMojo. Still the coolest name I think I've ever heard for a company, Paul. Hang tight. We'll be right back.
All right, perfect, guys. All clear. Back in 2.
Thanks, Matt.
All right.
Yeah, I like our name. It took us a long time to decide on certainty management, and then my radio show took even longer to decide because we went through a lot of different ideas and iterations. But I love the name Finding Certainty. I think we really did well with that. But
Well, it was
FindMojo. That's pretty awesome.
the way. Well, it was funny because the company we originally founded was called The Culture Works, and so there was me and Lance, and there was these 2 other best-selling authors that I've mentioned before, who really are the ones. I mean, I can't take all the credit, but they wrote the books and did the research. I'm the one that built the training programs out of that content. But as the pandemic hit, they were looking to near retirement, and they were the ones that would write books and go out and speak, right?
Right.
And Lance and I were like, well, the crown jewel of the IP is this assessment tool. People want data, and that's all we were really selling because there was no training or speaking engagements during COVID.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, all my I was supposed to go to Kuwait and Tennessee and Toronto, and it all like dried up overnight. And so I had the crazy idea one day. I said, Lance, I think we've got 2 different companies here. And we talked to our business partners, and like I said, they were nearing retirement. So we basically bought the IP for the all things motivation side of the business. And I'm like, Lance, what do we call this thing? And one day I was talking to one of my business partners. He says, yeah, I'm coaching one of these executives, and he's just in a funk. And he's like, I got to get my mojo back. I need to find some mojo. And it hit me like a bolt of lightning. I said, Lance, see what web domains are available with the word mojo. And so FindMojo was available. I'm like, that's it, man. That's the company. That's the name of our course, Find Your Mojo. And, and it all kind of coalesced together.
Yeah, it fell into place. It was meant to be.
It seems like it. So,
serendipity. My parents refer to oftentimes divine choreography.
All right, sorry to jump in here, guys, but we are coming back.
Okay.
Thanks, man.
You're listening to Finding Certainty with Patrick Lang. Have a question for Patrick or his guests? Join us on the show at 866-472-5790. That's 866-472-5790. Now, back to the show with Patrick.
Well, you're still stuck with us here at Finding Certainty, visiting with my good friend Paul Yoachum about his company FindMojo. He's partnered with Lance Garvin. And do you have other partners, or is it just you and Lance?
No, we've got a couple of other partners who are kind of the co-founders and managing partners. And then, of course, we've got a smattering of employees as well that help us sell, deliver. But there's kind of 3 main co-founders, myself, Lance Garvin, who runs our sales division, and a woman named Brianna Bateman, who is kind of our operations officer. So the 3 of us are kind of the principals of the firm, but we've got a vast network of trainers and coaches and affiliates and others that are fans of the tool and have incorporated it into their life's work and some of their curriculum.
Well, I love the fact that it will work for a small startup. It'll work for a large enterprise, Fortune 500 company, of which you've worked with several, Disney and Pepsi. I mean, the list goes on and on. Some pretty significant clients there. And as we were saying before the break, I'd really like to talk a little bit more about how you use the assessment. Once you have it and you organize that data, How do you use it to manage effectively? I have my ideas, but you're the expert. So
Yeah.
I will say this though, just as a preface, I love the way that it organizes in, even on a page, you can create a spreadsheet that shows every employee, all their motivators, and you can even create teams, you can create assignments, you can change roles, you can add to roles, whatever the case might be. We were talking about the lady at Wendy's and one of her top executives. It was miserable. She was amazing, but not happy with the way she was being managed. So let's talk about that, because I think for us to create certainty, and the show is called Finding Certainty, but we talk a lot about how we have to create it. We have to go develop it, right? It doesn't just land in our laps more often than not. I believe this is a really important piece for any employer out there for managing their people. It's understanding them. And if you don't understand them, how can you? A cookie cutter approach does not work, certainly not in the long term. So
Yeah, for
I'll
the
give you the
longest,
mic.
yeah, you bet. For the longest time, I mean, managers, we got to treat everybody the same because it's fair, because it's easy, and that's just old school thinking. And so when we talk about, the unknown, really what the tool, the motivators assessment does is it's a light bulb. It shines, it gives people common language. And what's cool about this assessment, unlike others, is that there is a team component. So you've taken the assessment and you're like, okay, now what? What do I do? Well, the assessment also comes with a pretty detailed 40-page report that'll show you how your motivators cluster together into these identities. And then for each of these identities, it's going to show you, who you are, where you thrive at work, which tasks are motivating to you, which ones are demotivating to you. It's going to give you some strategies on how you can, as an individual, enhance your value and do more at work. It also has a whole section on blind spots and how you can, overcome unconscious bias and things like that, because we're not all motivated the same way. An achiever, for example, who wants to get things done and is very driven, can frustrate a thinker who wants to maybe be a little bit more deliberate and is creative. I had a session not long ago, Patrick, with a leadership team, and they had 9 thinkers and 1 achiever in the room. And you could see that achiever was getting frustrated. He's getting things done, problem solving. Right. The thinkers were just being creative, and they said, well, let's think through this. What would the impact of that be? And let's just do it. And so these motivators and identities can kind of bump up against each other. So what's so cool about it is we have figured out a myriad of applications that you as an individual can do, as well as what a manager can do for their team. So let me just give you a quick rundown. So I'm an individual. I've just discovered what motivates me. We've got a whole proprietary process called job sculpting, where we look at the career arc of a person, why they've accepted and left a job, what parts of their job were fulfilling and weren't. We look at what are you doing today? Which tasks and responsibilities do you have that line up with your motivators, and which ones are out of alignment? And then what do you want to do for the future? Could you alter a task to make it more fulfilling, maybe doing it a little bit different way? Could you transfer it to somebody else on the team? You might not like doing it, but somebody else might like doing it. And do it that way. And then from a team perspective, a manager can look across the team report and say, wow, I've got 11 people on my team and every one of them is motivated by learning, but learning's number 21 out of 23 for me. So I'm failing as a manager if I'm not providing opportunities for them to learn and grow, for example. You can see where somebody has a uniqueness on the team. Oh, this person's the only one. Patrick, you're the only one on my team motivated by service. You know what? How would you feel about me putting you in charge of our Day of Caring initiative to work with the community outreach initiative? And it's not that other people on the team couldn't do it, but you're probably going to enjoy doing it. So often we think about giving a task or a project to somebody because they can do it and we know they'll get it done. And skills and aptitude are important, don't get me wrong. But if you have the opportunity to stop and say, well, I wonder if they're going to enjoy it, right? Let me give you a quick example. I've got 2 employees that I need to send to a networking event in a couple of months. I can send employee number 1, who's motivated by autonomy and creativity and all the things that have to do with other people, empathy, teamwork, friendship. Those are all bottom motivators. Now he could go and do it. He'd do an okay job. Or I could send somebody like you, my business partner, Lance, who's motivated by fun, friendship, and teamwork. He's going to knock it out of the park because that's just what he's wired to do, right? So this idea is in his element. So we call this manage to the one, where leaders can play chess. We like to, great managers play chess. Average managers play checkers, where you're trying to align more of what people love to do and less of what frustrates them. So
I remember Lance sharing with me an example of a lady who her motivator was fun and teamwork and so forth, and so they put her in charge of planning out all of their events, the Christmas party and the summer picnic or whatever. And for some person that sounds like just total drudgery, right? And that's what's interesting about it. I'm giving you this job that I feel like I'm dumping it on you.
Yeah.
And sweet, this is exactly what I wanted to do. Right?
Yeah.
You don't understand that.
If it lines up with their motivator.
Yeah. I mean, how can you make those decisions, which are like chess? I'm a chess player, and you're constantly thinking 3 or 4 moves ahead.
Yeah.
How can you do that if you don't have that understanding? You're just guessing. You're just shooting in the dark.
Well, you're right. And so many managers, they have good intentions, and they'll even sit down with their people and they'll ask them questions like, where do you see yourself? Where do you want to go with this? And oftentimes the employees don't really even know or have a plan. And far too often, so many one-on-ones. And again, whether you're a $1 billion company or a 5-person organization, if you've got people, you've got problems, as we always joke, right? And so many leaders, they try, and they, most of our one-on-ones, we say things like, where are we at with this project? Where are we at with this deadline? Instead of having a conversation every now and again about what parts of your job do you really enjoy? Which parts of your job frustrate you? And if we can couple that with some data, and we can find all these other cool applications, like why would I recognize an achiever the same way I'd recognize a thinker? It's just going to be less meaningful to them, right? How can I have an aspirational conversation with somebody about where they want to go in their career if I don't even know what gets them out of bed in the morning? So you can use this for a myriad of applications, both from an individual perspective as well as from a team perspective.
Well, I see it as something that anyone could benefit from, not just in the corporate world or in small business, but even in families and relationships and so forth. I want my wife to take it. I'm going to send her the link and have her take it, so I understand what motivates her better. It's funny because for a long time I worked for other companies. I was an employee. I made them millions of dollars, but I wasn't happy. And my wife, different motivators, she thought salary, benefits, there's the security, and that's important. And I'm sure once I saw her motivators, they're going to be a little different from mine.
Yeah.
Her credit, she said, I want you to be happy. She looked beyond what was comfortable for her and beyond what seemed reasonable to her, even what just common sense. Her dad was a principal, her mom was a speech pathologist. They worked for the school district, and for her that makes sense, right? It resonates. It's in her element. But to her credit, she said, I want you to be happy. I'll tell you a little insight about my wife. I ask her, where do you want to live, honey? And she always says, with you. So anyway, we're coming toward the end of the show, but anything we've missed or anything you want to add to?
Well, I would love, if it's appropriate, if you feel okay, I would love anybody listening to be able to take this assessment for free. We normally charge $60 for it for our corporate clients, but for listeners of you, Patrick, they had to listen to me too. So the least I can do is maybe give them something for free. So I don't know if you want to put it in the chat or we can send it out, but the URL, and I'll say it slowly because we don't give this out to just everybody, but the word assessment.findmojo, one word, .com/free. So assessment.findmojo.com/free. And you can take it. You'll discover your top motivators, your bottom motivator, and your identity. And it's a great way to just kind of get started. There'll be things that are confirming, and there will certainly be things that are surprising when you take it.
I can certainly resonate with that. I said the first 7, as I saw them, I thought, well, that describes me to a T. The others, though, including the fact that money was fairly low down, because that's important to me. I'm trying to build a company and a career and a retirement, and I was really surprised to see that it was in my bottom 5. But but at the same time, not so much. Once
We've
you go through that assessment, you're like, okay, yeah, this makes sense, even if I didn't realize it before.
Yeah, we've got a woman that works for us, and she's got 5 children, but she's got family at number 19 out of 23. And we always joke, hey, we're calling social services. You hate your kids, And she's a good sport about it. But the reality is she says, when I'm fulfilled and happy at work, I know my family's going to is going to be taken care of. Versus somebody who has family as a top motivator, for example, they look at that a little bit differently. They want work-life balance. They want flexibility in their work. They want to leave a legacy, right? So two people who love their families, but motivators at completely different ends of the spectrum.
Sure, absolutely. How do people get a hold of you if they want to learn more?
Yeah, reach out to us at FindMojo, FindMojo.com, and you can learn about our assessment, our workshops that we help, our coaching programs to help individuals implement what they've learned, and you can request a free assessment there. And we'd love to kind of hear what you're struggling with. If you got people, they're probably not telling you the full story in terms of what's frightening to them at work, what they're uncertain about. This is just a great, easy way to start a conversation around, hey, let's see if we can figure out some things that'll get you more jazzed about work.
Yeah. Well, I couldn't agree more. I appreciate you being on the show today, Paul. I think what you're doing is making an extraordinary difference in the workplace. And if people are happy at work, they're going to be happier everywhere. So it's a great way to find more certainty in our lives. So we are out of time. Thanks for listening, everyone. Hope you have a fantastic weekend. Summer is passing quickly. I hope you're enjoying it. Thanks for joining us this morning, and we'll see you next week.
All right. Terrific show today, guys. All clear.
Thanks a lot, Matt.
Yep. All right. You both have a great weekend.
You as well. Take care.
Right, thanks, Matt.
Bye-bye. Yep. You're welcome. Thank you.
Well,
hey, thanks again, Patrick.
Yeah, you bet. We're still recording on our YouTube. I always say they get the behind the scenes and the before and after, but was there anything we missed or anything you want to add in?
No, I think you covered it all nicely. And I mean, this as well as I do. You could train this in your sleep as well. You hit on all the points, and and the questions were just spot on for me to kind of tell my traditional story as the way it came about and how we use it. So no, it's awesome. I love working together. I think we can do some serious damage with this. I love that it fits in with some of the stuff you're already doing naturally. That's what's so great about it.
Well, it definitely does. My guess, I was looking back through our roster of guests, and I think many of them, I'm going to actually send a message. I'll send an email out to all of them, introducing them to you, because I've had guests like Paul or Win Claybaugh, who's the CEO and co-founder of Paul Mitchell the Schools. Right, they have over 1,000 locations that work with them. Gary Reeves, he runs a television show on the O Network called Give, and it's focused on nonprofits and organizations that are giving back. I think of Sir Dr. James Dentley III. He's a motivational speaker, speaks all over the world. I mean, he would love this FindMojo assessment, I think. So, the list goes on.
It's just a cool tool. Really, yeah. Well, let's get that. Let's start getting you some affiliate cash too. So
we don't care about that as much, but
it'll come naturally just because we're doing good work.
Yeah, absolutely. I just think if I'm all about not just making income, but making a difference. And I know you feel the same way, and that is exactly what this can do. So we're big fans. We're cheering you on, and I wish you the very best, my friend.
Thanks, man. I'm glad we met, and let's keep chatting. And would love to get on Frank's show as well and chat with his audience. And so, when you've got a recording or the link to the YouTube, we will send it out to all of our database as well. So, and invite them to join, to be part of or to be a listener of your show.
Yeah, absolutely. We appreciate it. We'll be back in Utah here again shortly. We'll have to go hit Bam Bam's.
Let's do it. I'm always down.
Our barbecue nachos, right?
Yeah, I love it. So, all right. Well, hey, thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun. I appreciate it, and love the exposure. So you're a good man.
Absolutely. Our pleasure. It's good media piece for you to keep using. I think it's we covered a lot, and I'm always told that my show feels like kind of a stroll down memories lane, I guess.
Yeah.
And so we try to do a good job of that. But
no, it's great.
Thanks for being on, man. I really appreciate it.
A lot of fun. All right, man. Have a great weekend. We'll talk soon.
You too, man. Take care.